He thought he'd finally escaped her. After weeks of being followed by a silent, barefoot girl with amber eyes, Officer Derek Holloway fled to a distant coastal motel. No badge, no backup, just the road and desperation. But as morning fog rolled in, she was there again, standing still, pointing at the back seat of his car. Inside, he found a charred photo, with his handwriting on the back. What happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The first time Officer Derek Holloway saw her, the night air was heavy with silence, the kind that pressed in on your eardrums and made your heartbeat sound too loud. The streetlight cast a lonely cone of pale orange, just enough to catch the glint of her eyes. Large, amber, unblinking. She stood barefoot on cracked asphalt, wrapped in a hoodie 3 sizes too big, sleeves limp past her fingers. She didn't move when Derek slowed the cruiser, didn't flinch when he opened the door and called out. She just stared. By the time he stepped into the street, she was gone, vanished like fog under headlights. That might have been the end of it. A fluke, a trick of light and exhaustion. But 2 days later, she was there again. This time, outside the station house, her silhouette framed by the back gate. Then again, standing still as bone just across from his building on Ellis Street. Once more, outside the diner on Hemlock where he always grabbed his 5 a.m. black coffee. This time close enough for him to see the tear in the sleeve of her hoodie and the grime on her cheek. She didn't beg, didn't speak, didn't even blink. Just stared, as though she was waiting for him to remember something he couldn't. At first, Derek convinced himself it was some kind of prank. Maybe a runaway who'd latched onto him for reasons unknown. Maybe someone messing with his head. He checked case files, pulled up missing persons reports, combed the internal database for anything that matched her description. Nothing. Then came the dreams. Not vivid. Worse. Vague. Static-filled flashes of smoke and red, of muffled cries, of ash clinging to torn curtains and a child's shape curled in the corner of a room. Every time he jolted awake, heart slamming, he felt it. She had been there. In the dream. In the room. In the smoke. And somehow, in his waking world. He tried talking to the others. His partner thought he was overworked. Chief Rollins pulled him aside and handed him a wellness packet. "Go home. Rest," she said, her voice too careful. "There's no one out there, Holloway." But she was out there. No matter where he went, she found him. At intersections, on rooftops, behind chain-link fences, in puddles reflecting city neon. And when he looked into those amber eyes, he felt something he hadn't in a decade of service. Something worse than guilt, deeper than fear. Recognition. The highway was empty at that hour, black and indifferent, the painted lines like scars under the beams of Derek's headlights. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to move. As long as the tires hummed and the engine growled low, there was distance between him and her. The girl. The ghost. The weight he hadn't asked to carry, but now bore in his bones like lead. The coast was a blur of pines and fog, a strip of tired motels clinging to the edge of a gray sea. He picked one without looking, paid cash, avoided eye contact, slept with one eye open. It was the sound of gulls that woke him, sharp, erratic cries like laughter made cruel. Light seeped through the gaps in the curtains, cold and colorless. Derek stepped outside barefoot, coffee in hand, shoulders tight from another sleepless night. For a moment, there was nothing but the dull crash of waves beyond the dunes. Then he saw her. Across the lot, just behind the battered vending machine, she stood half-shadowed by morning mist. Her hoodie hung damp, her feet bare on the gravel. Still, silent, staring. This time, something inside Derek snapped. He didn't walk, He stormed. "What do you want from me?" His voice cracked, harsh from disuse, from desperation. "Why are you following me?" She didn't answer, didn't run. She lifted one hand, slow, deliberate, and pointed toward his car. Derek turned, suddenly cold. The air felt wrong, the silence brittle. He crossed to the vehicle, heart thudding against his ribs like a warning drum. He opened the back door with a trembling hand. There, under the passenger seat, coated in a thin layer of soot and time, was a folded square of paper, burnt at the corners. Edges curled. He knew before touching it what it was. The photograph had once shown a group, 2 kids, a mother, a trailer behind them. Faded laughter still clung to the image in the way smiles linger after tragedy. On the back, in his own cursive block letters, "Morningside 2019, fire ruled accidental." He remembered. Barely. It had been another closed file, another late shift, another day he hadn't looked deep enough. 3 dead, 1 unaccounted for. The girl in the picture, no older than 5, peeking over her brother's shoulder with wide gold-flecked eyes he had seen every night since. The name came to him like a match striking dry wood. Lynx. Short, sharp, unforgettable. He hadn't seen it in years, but it was there in the old file, circled in red pen next to the word missing. No last name, just Lynx. A child's name written in panic on a hospital form, no next of kin, no surviving relatives. An ember in a sea of ashes, and he had let her burn in the silence of bureaucracy. He sat in the driver's seat for a long time, gripping the photograph. Every breath felt like it scraped against glass. He remembered how it had gone. A late-night call, smoke still rising off the skeletons of trailers, the stench of melted plastic, charred furniture, and wet insulation hanging in the air. A tired neighbor insisting she saw someone behind the lot hours before the fire, maybe fiddling with the propane hookup. He hadn't written that part down. Too thin, he'd told himself. Too unreliable. He'd been overworked, running on caffeine and resentment. When the fire inspector filed his report, Derek skimmed it, rubber-stamped accidental, and moved on to the next case. Another overdose. Another DV call. Another lost face in a system of ghosts. But Lynx had survived. Somehow. Somewhere in the smoke and chaos, she'd slipped through and disappeared into the cracks he was supposed to seal shut. And now she had come back. Not as a victim, not even as a ghost, but as a mirror. One he couldn't avoid. He didn't return to the station. He drove straight to Morningside Trailer Park, or what was left of it. The place was barely recognizable. Overgrown weeds where lot lines used to be, graffiti on the twisted frames of forgotten swing sets, plywood signs warning trespassers. The scorched foundation of Lot 7 was still there, cracked and blackened. Derek knelt in the dirt, brushing away pine needles and soot until his nails tore. His hands shook as they uncovered the small rusted lockbox. Inside, a melted action figure, warped and blackened. A friendship bracelet, once pink and green, now gray with ash. And a single drawing on soot-streaked paper. A stick-figure man in a blue rectangle labeled Police. His name scrawled beneath it in a child's unsure letters, Derek. He sat back, the wind howling low through the trees. It wasn't just memory that haunted him. It was proof. She had known him. She had watched him. And she hadn't forgotten. Justice, when it comes late, doesn't roar. It whispers, through paper trails, through phone calls made in trembling tones, through reopened wounds disguised as files. Derek Holloway sat alone at his kitchen table, the photograph spread out like a confession. The coffee had gone cold. His badge sat beside the photo, not gleaming with pride but dulled by the weight of failure. He spent the next 48 hours buried in archives, incident logs, fire reports, interviews long dismissed. The original arson report had been cleaned, Sterilized. No mention of the witness. No indication of foul play. Just propane heater malfunction. Case closed. But Derek remembered the woman now. Charlene Miles. She'd been shaking when she spoke, eyes bloodshot, breath sour with cheap gin, but her words had been clear. I saw someone hook a hose to that tank who didn't belong there. Big guy. Morningside's owner, I think. He'd ignored her, dismissed her as unreliable. Now he tracked her down, 2 towns over, living in a crumbling duplex with a stack of unpaid bills and a voice more tired than angry. When she opened the door and saw him, she didn't slam it. She just nodded. Took you long enough? Her testimony, combined with the results of a private forensic reanalysis, char patterns inconsistent with equipment failure, traces of accelerant near the gas line, was enough to file for an emergency hearing. Derek filed everything personally. Every document, every piece of evidence. No shield, no department lawyers, just a man confronting the wreckage of his own inaction. The courtroom was a cold room dressed in wood and pretense. Hal Judson sat in a charcoal suit, impassive, a man who had built his fortune on low-income tenants and paper-thin trailers, now watching as it all unraveled. Derek stood before the judge and did what few officers ever did. He confessed, not to crime, but to complicity through neglect. He admitted that the report had been closed hastily, that a girl had vanished because he hadn't cared enough to look. The room was silent when he finished. Then came the footsteps, soft, even. Lynx entered, flanked by a guardian, hair combed, jeans pressed, a blue sweater too new to be hers. She crossed the courtroom slowly, her gaze steady, unreadable. When she reached him, she reached into her pocket and handed over the old, burned photograph. No words, just a gesture. Derek took it with both hands. His throat clenched. He dropped his head. She wasn't pointing anymore. She was trusting him. One last time.